Blood isn't always thicker than water. Sometimes it's just the exact currency a jealous sibling needs to steal your life. Clara thought her engagement to Manhattan's most elusive billionaire was a modern fairy tale. She didn't realize her sister packed a silver dagger or that her fiancé drank human blood. Champagne glasses clinked in a melodic symphony that echoed across the vaulted ceilings of the Pierre Hotel's grand ballroom. Clara Harrington stood at the center of the opulence, her fingers tracing the intricate lace of her custom couture gown. She should have felt like the happiest woman in New York City. Surrounding her were the city's most formidable elites: William Rutherford, the ruthless CEO of Apex Global; Cynthia Harland, the notoriously discerning socialite; and Governor Philip Davies, who was busy laughing at a joke Clara's fiancé had just made. Alistair Montgomery was a man who commanded the room without raising his voice. He stood beside Clara, his presence a magnetic force that pulled the room's attention entirely into his orbit. Tall, with sharp, aristocratic features and eyes the color of a storm-tossed ocean, Alistair was perfect. Too perfect, some whispered in the high society circles. He never seemed to age, his wealth was practically immeasurable, and his skin possessed a flawless, marble-like pallor that only made him more devastatingly handsome. He rested a cool, reassuring hand on Clara's waist, grounding her amidst the dizzying swirl of the engagement gala. Clara smiled up at him, the anxiety that usually plagued her chest melting away under his intense, devoted gaze. For her entire life, Clara had been the shadow. She was the quiet, dependable daughter of the Harrington family, constantly eclipsed by the blazing, destructive sun that was her older sister. But Alistair had chosen her. Out of all the glittering socialites and ambitious heiresses in the world, the enigmatic billionaire had looked at Clara and seen a queen. "Oh, you are trembling, my love," Alistair murmured, his voice a rich baritone that hummed against her ear. His breath was noticeably cool, a quirk Clara had long ago stopped questioning. "The night is for you. Ignore the vultures. They are only here to witness what they can never have." "I'm just overwhelmed," Clara admitted, leaning slightly into his side. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. Things like this, grand ballrooms, men like you, they don't happen to women like me. Usually they happen to—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. The heavy oak doors of the ballroom swung open with a dramatic, booming thud that silenced the string quartet in the corner. Whispers immediately rippled through the crowd of dignitaries and billionaires. Walking down the grand staircase, draped in a scandalous crimson gown that left little to the imagination, was Vivian Harrington. Clara's blood ran cold. Her heart slammed against her ribs like a trapped bird. Vivian was not invited. After the disastrous incident at their father's funeral 3 years ago, where Vivian had drunkenly accused Clara of stealing their inheritance, Clara had cut all ties. Yet here she was, her lips painted a venomous red, her eyes locked dead onto Clara with a predatory gleam. "Darling sister," Vivian's voice carried over the hushed murmurs of the elite crowd. She descended the stairs with the unearned confidence of a conqueror, holding a crystal flute of champagne. "Did you really think you could celebrate the most important night of your life without your only family?" Alistair's grip on Clara's waist tightened fractionally. It wasn't a painful grip, but the sheer, unyielding strength in his fingers was a stark reminder of the hidden power coiled beneath his tailored tuxedo. Clara glanced up and gasped softly. Alistair's storm-grey eyes had darkened to an abyssal, terrifying black. The temperature immediately surrounding them seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Alistair, please," Clara whispered, frantically terrified of a public scene. "Let me handle her. She just wants attention. If we ignore her, she'll eventually leave." "I do not ignore threats to my peace, Clara," Alistair replied softly, though his voice lacked its usual warmth. It was sharp, lethal. "And I certainly do not ignore vermin that crawl into my home to ruin your joy." Before Alistair could summon his incredibly intimidating head of security, Jonathan Hayes' Vivian was already upon them. She bypassed Clara completely, her predatory gaze fixed entirely on Alistair. Up close, Vivian's beauty was undeniable, but it was a harsh, manufactured beauty sharpened by years of envy and manipulation. "Alistair Montgomery," Vivian purred, extending a hand that was heavily adorned with diamonds she couldn't afford. "I've heard the legends. The reclusive billionaire. The man who owns half of Manhattan but never steps out in the daylight. I must say Clara's descriptions didn't do you justice. You are Extraordinary. Alistair did not take her hand. He simply stared down at her, his expression a mask of absolute chilling indifference. Miss Harrington, your presence is a breach of security and a slight to my fiancé. You have exactly 30 seconds to vacate these premises before you are forcibly removed. Vivian didn't flinch. Instead, she laughed a sharp, grating sound that made Clara's stomach churn. She dropped her hand and stepped dangerously close to Alistair, completely ignoring Clara. I don't think you'll be throwing me out, Alistair, Vivian whispered loudly enough for only the three of them to hear. She reached into her sequined clutch and pulled out a thick folded manila envelope. Not when I know exactly what you are, and more importantly, not when I know what you keep in the sub-basement of your estate in the Hamptons. Clara frowned, confusion cutting through her panic. Vivian, what are you talking about? Stop this immediately. Vivian finally looked at Clara, a cruel, triumphant smile stretching across her face. Oh, poor, naive little Clara, always playing with toys you don't understand. Why don't we step into the private lounge? Unless, of course, your dear fiancé wants me to show these photographs to Governor Davies. The private lounge off the main ballroom was suffocatingly quiet. The heavy velvet curtains muted the sounds of the orchestra outside, leaving only the tense, heavy breathing of the two sisters. Alistair had agreed to the private meeting with a single curt nod, though Clara noticed the predatory grace in his steps as he locked the oak doors behind them. Vivian wasted no time. She tossed the manila envelope onto the mahogany coffee table. Glossy photographs spilled out, scattering under the dim, amber glow of the chandelier. Clara hesitated, her hands shaking as she reached for the nearest image. It was a photograph of a massive, sterile room. Racks of medical-grade blood bags lined the walls, guarded by heavily armed men. Another photo showed Alistair, taken from a great distance via a telephoto lens, standing in an alleyway in Prague. His face was obscured by shadows, but his eyes, glowing with an unnatural, terrifying crimson light, were clearly visible. The final photo was a historical document, a shipping manifest from 1892, the signature at the bottom bearing the exact flawless penmanship of the man standing next to Clara read a Montgomery. Richard Caldwell, Vivian said smugly, walking over to the private bar to pour herself a scotch. The best private investigator money can buy. It cost me every dime of my trust fund. But I knew there was something wrong with him. A man doesn't just amass that much wealth and stay utterly hidden from the public eye. I thought he was in the cartel. I thought he was a mob boss. She took a sip, her eyes gleaming with manic victory. I never imagined he was a monster, a literal, blood-drinking vampire. Clara dropped the photos. The paper felt like it was burning her fingers. She turned to Alistair, her chest heaving. She expected him to laugh, to call Vivian insane, to explain away the ridiculous claims. But Alistair stood perfectly still. He was leaning against the heavy oak door, his hands in his pockets, watching Vivian with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a particularly stupid insect. He didn't look at Clara. He didn't deny it. Alistair? Clara's voice cracked barely a whisper. Tell her she's crazy. Alistair finally shifted his gaze to her. The coldness vanished, replaced by a deep, agonizing sorrow. I cannot lie to you, Clara. Not tonight. Not ever. The silence that followed was deafening. Clara stumbled back, hitting the edge of the leather sofa. The man she loved, the man who kissed her forehead every morning, who remembered her favorite obscure poets, and built her a greenhouse just because she mentioned liking orchids, was a centuries-old predator. Vivian cackled, clapping her hands together. Oh, the look on your face, priceless. Did you really think an immortal king would want a boring, mousy little librarian for the rest of eternity? You're just a blood bag to him, Clara, a convenient, naive little snack to keep him entertained in the modern era. What do you want, Vivian? Alistair's voice sliced through the room. It was no longer the voice of a wealthy businessman. It carried the chilling, echoing weight of centuries. The sound of it vibrated in Clara's bones, triggering a primal instinct to run. Vivian straightened up, setting her glass down. Her bravado faltered for a fraction of a second against Alistair's true aura, but her greed quickly overrode her survival instincts. I want the life she stole from me, Vivian demanded, pointing a manicured finger at Clara. She has always gotten the easy way out, the good grades, the father's love, and now the ultimate power. I know how your kind works, Alistair. Caldwell dug up the folklore. You can turn people. You can make them immortal, beautiful, and rich beyond comprehension. Clara watched in absolute horror as her sister walked toward the immortal creature, her posture shifting into something seductive. "Break the engagement," Vivian ordered, her voice dropping to a husky whisper as she stopped inches from Alistair. "Throw her back to the pathetic life she belongs in. Take me instead. Turn me. I am ruthless Alistair. I am ambitious. I can stand by your side and help you rule whatever dark empire you control. I won't cower like she does. I will be your queen. If you refuse, Caldwell has instructions to send this entire dossier to the FBI, the Vatican, and every major news outlet in the world." Clara felt the tears finally spill over her cheeks. It wasn't the revelation of Alistair's nature that broke her heart. It was the ultimate, irredeemable betrayal of her own flesh and blood. Vivian was willing to throw her to the wolves, literally just to steal her crown. Alistair looked down at Vivian. He slowly pulled his hands from his pockets. "You hired a human investigator to track my movements. You spent your inheritance to uncover a secret that men have died screaming to protect." "I did," Vivian smiled, leaning her neck back slightly, exposing her throat in a clear, sick invitation. "Because I am worthy of the Montgomery name." Alistair chuckled. It was a dark, terrifying sound that seemed to suck the air out of the room. He reached out his pale, flawless fingers, gently tracing the line of Vivian's jaw. Vivian closed her eyes, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips, fully believing she had won. "You misunderstand the nature of a king," Alistair whispered softly, "and you vastly underestimate the woman I love." In a blur of motion so fast the human eye couldn't track it, Alistair's hand clamped around Vivian's throat. Her eyes snapped open in sheer terror as her feet left the ground. Alistair lifted her effortlessly with one arm, his face shifting. His aristocratic features tightened, his eyes bleeding into a terrifying luminous red, and his jaw subtly unhinging to reveal a set of razor-sharp, gleaming fangs. Vivian choked her hand, scrambling uselessly against his iron grip. Her silver clutch dropped to the floor, spilling the contents, including a small, ornate silver dagger. "You think you are ruthless, little girl," Alistair snarled, the monstrous timbre of his voice shaking the crystal glasses on the bar. "You are nothing but a petty, envious child playing in a graveyard. You offer me your soul, but it is rotten. You offer me your loyalty, but you just betrayed your own blood. Clara is my chosen mate because her heart is pure, something you could not buy with all the wealth in my vaults." Alistair threw Vivian to the ground. She landed hard against the rug, coughing and gasping for air, clutching her bruised throat. She scrambled backward, her eyes wide with the realization that she had just threatened a true apex predator. Alistair stepped over the scattered photographs, his boots crushing the image of himself. He knelt in front of Clara, entirely ignoring the weeping woman on the floor. His eyes slowly faded back to their beautiful storm gray. "Clara," he said softly, his tone pleading, vulnerable. "I swear to you, on my immortal life, I have never harmed an innocent. I drink from willing donors. I have spent 200 years building a life where I could be human again. And then I found you." He reached out, hesitating before gently taking her trembling hands. "I am a monster, but I am your monster. If you want me to leave, I will vanish tonight, and you will never see me again. But I will not let this vile creature harm you." Clara looked from the terrified, pathetic figure of her sister on the floor to the ancient, terrifying king kneeling at her feet. Her sister had come to ruin her life, but the vampire had only ever tried to protect it. Clara stared at the devastatingly handsome creature kneeling before her, the plush mahogany carpet offering a stark contrast to his unnatural marble-like pallor. Her chest heaved as she processed the impossible reality of the last 10 minutes. Vampires were supposed to be the stuff of cheap paperback novels and Gothic cinema, not billionaires who donated wings to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and gently brushed the hair from her eyes when she fell asleep reading. Yet, as she looked into Alistair's storm-grey eyes that held 2 centuries of grief power and an agonizingly desperate love for her, the choice was terrifyingly simple. Her own sister, flesh of her flesh, had just attempted to sell Clara's life for a taste of immortality and a seat at a blood-soaked throne. Alistair, the literal monster, had bared his throat to her, offering her the ultimate choice to walk away. Clara reached out her trembling fingers, brushing against the frigid skin of Alistair's cheek. He leaned into her touch, a shudder breath escaping his lips. "You didn't lie to me about who you are as a man," Clara whispered, her voice gaining strength with every syllable. "You just omitted the biology. I don't care if you drink blood, Alistair. I care that you didn't let her hurt me." Alistair's eyes widened, a profound, sweeping relief washing over his ancient features. He pressed a kiss to her palm, the brush of his lips impossibly tender. "How touching," Vivian wheezed from the floor, her voice hoarse from the bruising grip Alistair had subjected her to. She used the arm of a leather chair to haul herself up, her crimson gown, now wrinkled, her manufactured confidence replaced by the feral desperation of a cornered animal. "A beautiful Gothic romance. Too bad it ends at midnight." Clara stood up, her custom couture gown swishing around her ankles as she stepped firmly between Alistair and her sister. "You need to leave Vivian, right now, before I let him finish what he started." Vivian barked out a harsh, agonizing laugh, massaging her throat. "You really think I walked into the lion's den without a backup plan, Clara? I am a Harrington. We don't play to lose." She glared at Alistair, her eyes burning with toxic malice. "Richard Caldwell isn't just some back-alley private eye. He is a former senior operative for Kroll Inc., the largest corporate intelligence firm on the planet. He knows how to handle dangerous men." Alistair rose to his feet, his imposing frame casting a long, terrifying shadow across the room. He didn't speak, he simply let Vivian dig her own grave with her arrogant monologuing. "The files," Vivian sneered, checking a diamond-encrusted watch on her wrist. "The shipping manifests, the blood bank photos, the high-resolution images of your glowing red eyes, they are loaded onto a heavily encrypted server. If I do not personally call Caldwell and provide a randomized vocal passcode by midnight, the server automatically executes a protocol. The entire dossier goes straight to the senior partners at Sullivan and Cromwell, the top executive editors of every major global news syndicate and a highly specialized paramilitary branch of the federal government." Clara felt a cold sweat break out across her neck. She knew of Sullivan and Cromwell. Their father had used the elite law firm for years. If a dossier like that landed on their desks, the legal and public fallout would be catastrophic. Alistair would be hunted. He would be dissected. "You have exactly 45 minutes, Alistair." Vivian taunted, a wicked, triumphant smirk crawling back onto her face. "So let's renegotiate. Clara leaves tonight with nothing. I take her place. You give me the bite, you give me the ring, and I make the phone call to Caldwell to abort the leak. Or you can both spend the rest of eternity running from tactical drone strikes." Before Clara could utter a word of protest, a sharp knock echoed against the heavy oak doors of the private lounge. The sound was calm, rhythmic, and utterly out of place in the high-stakes hostage situation Vivian was attempting to construct. "Enter," Alistair commanded, his voice returning to its smooth, authoritative baritone. The oak doors clicked unlocked and swung open. Jonathan Hayes, Alistair's head of security, stepped into the room. Jonathan was a hulking, brutally scarred man who moved with a terrifyingly quiet grace. He was dressed in an impeccable black suit, a sleek earpiece resting in his right ear. In his massive hand, he held a remarkably small, burner-style cellular phone. "Apologies for the interruption, Mr. Montgomery," Jonathan said, his voice entirely devoid of emotion. He did not even spare a glance at Vivian, who was staring at him in confusion. "But Operative Team Alpha just checked in from the warehouse district in Brooklyn." "And the status of our uninvited guests' insurance policy?" Alistair asked smoothly, stepping forward to wrap a protective arm around Clara's waist. "Neutralized, sir," Jonathan replied, stepping forward to hand the burner phone to Alistair. "Mr. Caldwell was highly skilled for a human, but his encryption methods were severely outdated compared to our network. Our cyber division bypassed his dead man switch 20 minutes ago. The servers at Kroll Incorporated remain uncompromised." Vivian's triumphant smirk instantly dissolved into a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. No, that's impossible. Caldwell guaranteed the firewall was impenetrable. "Nothing in my city is impenetrable," Alistair murmured, pressing a button on the phone and putting it on speaker. Static hissed from the small speaker, followed by the wet, heavy sound of a man gasping for breath. Clara flinched, but Alistair's grip remained warm and grounding on her waist. Caldwell, Alistair spoke into the phone, his voice echoing with that strange, multi-layered, immortal resonance. Speak, Mr. Montgomery! A ragged, terrified voice crackled through the speaker. Richard Caldwell sounded completely broken. I swear to God I didn't look at the files. She just paid me to set up the server. I didn't know what you were. Please, your men, they're everywhere. Vivian lunged forward, her face twisted in panic. Caldwell, you idiot, trigger the manual override. Send the files to the press. Miss Harrington, Caldwell sobbed through the line. It's gone. They wiped everything. My hard drives, my cloud backups, my offshore accounts. They even deleted my digital identity. I don't exist anymore. Please just leave me alone. Alistair ended the call with a definitive click, dropping the burner phone onto the mahogany coffee table beside the scattered, useless photographs. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy with the crushing weight of Vivian's total defeat. You played a very dangerous game of chess, Vivian, Alistair said, his eyes locking onto the trembling woman. But you forgot one fundamental rule. You are a pawn. I own the board. Vivian fell to her knees, the fight completely drained from her body. Her grand villainous plot had been dismantled in less than an hour by a man who had spent 200 years perfecting the art of survival. Jonathan, Alistair commanded softly. Escort Miss Harrington to the loading dock. Ensure she is placed in a vehicle bound for Teterboro Airport. Her trust fund accounts at Chase Manhattan have already been frozen by my financial team. She will be boarding a one-way charter flight to a very remote, very austere monastery in the mountains of Peru. If she attempts to return to the United States, or if she ever speaks the name Montgomery again, you will not be quite so gentle with her. Understood, sir. Jonathan nodded, stepping toward Vivian. Clara! Vivian shrieked, finally turning to her sister, tears of genuine panic streaming down her face. Clara, please! You can't let him do this! I'm your sister! We share the same blood! Clara stepped out from under Alistair's arm. She walked slowly toward her sister, her heels clicking decisively against the hardwood floor. She looked down at the woman who had tormented her for a lifetime, the woman who had just tried to ruin her engagement, steal her fiancé, and subject her to public humiliation. You are right, Vivian, Clara said, her voice icy, devoid of the timid hesitation that had plagued her youth. We do share the same blood, but unfortunately for you, my fiancé has very specific tastes, and he finds yours completely toxic. Vivian sobbed, reaching out, but Jonathan was already there. The massive security chief gripped Vivian by the arms, hauling her effortlessly to her feet. He dragged the screaming, thrashing woman out of the private lounge, shutting the heavy oak doors behind them and severing her ties to Clara's world forever. Clara stood completely still for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of the orchestra filtering back into the room from the grand ballroom. Her heart was racing, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the intoxicating, undeniable surge of power. She had finally stood up for herself. She had protected her life. Alistair moved behind her, wrapping both arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. The chill of his skin was familiar now, a comforting anchor in the storm. Are you all right, my love? He murmured, pressing a soft kiss to her neck. Clara leaned back into his solid chest, staring at their reflection in the gilded mirror above the private bar. She saw a devastatingly handsome, immortal king, and in his arms she saw a woman who was no longer a shadow. She was a queen. I have never been better, Clara breathed. Turning in his arms to face him, she reached up, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. You wiped her trust fund? I own the bank, darling? Alistair smiled, a wicked boyish grin that made Clara's stomach flutter. It was the least I could do for the woman who just defended my honor against a corporate spy. Clara laughed, a bright, genuine sound that chased away the lingering shadows of the room. She stood on her tiptoes, pressing her lips firmly against his. His lips were cool, but the passion behind the kiss was burning, desperate, and entirely devoted to her. Come, Alistair whispered, pulling back just enough to gaze into her eyes. Governor Davies is likely wondering where I hid my stunning bride-to-be. Let us go show the world exactly who they belong to. Clara took his arm, her head held high, as they pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped back out into the glittering lights of the Pierre Hotel ballroom. The crowd parted for them. They were no longer just a billionaire and a quiet socialite. They were an unstoppable force, bound by blood secrets and a love that would outlast time itself. That is how you handle a toxic sister. Clara didn't just survive the ultimate betrayal. She embraced her dark new reality and claimed her throne. If you loved this intense vampire romance drama and the ruthless twists, hit that like button and share this story with your fellow dark romance lovers. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss another thrilling supernatural tale.